If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. This YouTube channel is under a shadow ban, so be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. Now, that said, white supremacy is reliant upon keeping the dominant society on a perpetual war footing. That's the reason why it's always at war at some time or other, at some point around the world, but mostly right here in the United States. The U.S. has been in a perpetual state of war. There was the war against the Axis powers, the war against communism, the war against poverty, the war on drugs, the war on terror, the war on tooth decay. Oh, this country just believes in war after war after war after war. But even after the Mother Emanuel Church massacre, even after the brutal asphyxiation of George Floyd, even after the Capitol Hill coup, you notice how nobody, absolutely nobody, is calling for a war on white supremacy. Oh, this country has no problem with calling for a war on anything else, everything else, particularly if they think it can be cycled or pivoted into a war against black people, and everything can be pivoted into that. But the second you start saying, hey, what about that war on white supremacy? They don't even have the nerve to say, oh, we can't do that. They won't even touch it. They won't even talk about it. It's too fearful even for contemplation. Joe Biden's been in office for 3 weeks now, and old boy still hasn't figured out how to say there ought to be a war on white supremacy. Oh, sure, he'll go ahead and give some pathetic, clearly insincere mention of forces of white supremacy. But then when you ask hey, so we're going to have this war on white supremacy, right? Not at all. What we need to do is we need to figure out how to help working families, white working families. So understand that. You don't have anybody in the federal government, or even state governments or local governments for that matter, no politicians out there demanding when are we going to start this war on white supremacy. Nobody calling for that. They know exactly who it was who tried to snuff out their lives a month ago, and yet none of them, not a damned one of them, not even the black ones, are going to say there must be a war on white supremacy. None of them are going to be saying that because all of them understand that they are the beneficiaries of white supremacy. Every single member of Congress, and especially Jim Crow Joe and Kamala Harris, they understand full well exactly what their true occupation is, what their real job is, and that is to uphold and defend white supremacy. Even if they got to give their lives for it, they've made a devil's bargain. They entered into a satanic pact with evil, and that pact was, if we have to lay down our lives to maintain white supremacy, so be it. But the political prostitutes in D.C., they're not the only ones who have been on a jihad to make sure that white supremacy is maintained at all costs. They're not the only ones fighting a war to protect and preserve white supremacy. Ever since the Capitol Hill coup took place, you've had the judges, in particular the judiciary. They've been showing that it ain't just white supremacist thugs with badges who can get that judicial immunity. It applies to anyone who happens to be classified as white. Anyone who's deemed as white, you get judicial immunity too. Jenny Cudd, who looks more like a cow, or may I more directly put it, a heifer chewing its cud, she was caught in the Capitol building with that 2-ton jaw of hers, smiling like an idiot. And you know why she was smiling? She understood what all of these other white supremacists understand, that as long as white supremacy remains standing, it doesn't matter what they do. It's always going to be brushed off. Even treason becomes a trivial matter. She told the judge, you know what, Your Honor, we need to send a message that white people are going to be super citizens in this country and, well, we're going to be a minority soon, but with the Hispanics who have already signed on to white supremacy by and large, we intend to be a ruling minority, and that being the case, we need to make sure everybody understands the law doesn't apply to us, so I want to go on vacation to Mexico. And the judge said, well, you're a white woman, so obviously the law doesn't apply to you. You're free to go to Mexico. Yeah, you can go ahead and skip the country. Sure, you just committed an act of treason, and you have absolutely no reason whatsoever to come back to the U.S. and face the heat for that. Not that it'll amount to much, but that being the case, there is the principle of white immunity from law that must be demonstrated. And by the way, am I the only one who's noticed that whenever you got some white person who's been accused of some high-profile crime, they usually go running off to Mexico? Whether it be Ethan Couch, you remember him, influenza boy, killed 4 people with his pickup truck and then ran off to Mexico. Or be it Eric Luster, who was drugging women, and unlike Bill Cosby, he was actually drugging them and raping them, not just accused of it. He ran off to Mexico too. Scott Peterson, they arrested him just 30 miles from the Mexican border, because that's where he was heading to. And now this Jenny chewing her cud woman. Yeah, it seems for some strange reason Mexico seems to be an alluring place for these guys, and these are the main ones who will be sitting out there just screaming to beat the band saying we got to keep the Mexicans out, and yet Mexico seems to be the place they want to go to. Now, what does that tell you? They understand that basically they just don't like having too many brown-skinned neighbors, even if their brown-skinned neighbors think that they're on the team. But when push comes to shove, these white supremacists know that all they got to do is make it south of the border, and, well, the same sort of psychopathic anti-black racism that many Afro-Mexicans deal with on a daily basis will also be there to help protect the Jenny Cuds and the Scott Petersons and the Ethan Couches and the rest of the trash. They understand that. See, they know what the reality is. White supremacy is global. And that being the case, sure, they may have their preferences about where they hang their hat, but at the end of the day, long as white supremacy is standing, they know that they can go run to a lot of places around the world because their global system doesn't just protect them in D.C. But Jenny Cud wasn't the only one who knew that the judge wasn't going to do anything about her. You also had Adam Johnson, who became famous for running around with Nancy Pelosi's lectern. He was arrested and then promptly released on bail. So apparently, even if you're running around with artifacts from the United States Capitol, well, that's not enough. If you're white, that's not enough to actually get you held on anything. I guess Nancy Pelosi's ability to get things done only goes so far. You even had one of the leaders of the Proud Boys who got himself hemmed up, but don't worry, he didn't stay hemmed up very long. You had a judge in Seattle. Isn't Seattle, supposed to be one of those liberal cities? And yet, the judge in Seattle, you had a judge there who decided that just because you got this white supremacist trash bag running around, he tried to overthrow the government. The Proud Boys showing that they don't just assault people in the streets, they prefer to try to go after anyone and everyone, including the nation's government. And, well, let's let this guy go. Now, keep in mind, the FBI has categorized the Proud Boys as an extremist group. The Canadian government has classified the Proud Boys as a terrorist organization. And yet, you've got this gang of violent thugs who have been making the news for attacking people, and here they are at the very center of the Capitol coup, and you got a judge in Seattle, which to hear the white right tell it is just so liberal, and yet you got these right-wing thugs who the judge says, let them go. Now, the white right, they love to try to say that Seattle, those left coast cities, those cities are just so soft on crime, and you don't hear any sort of outcry from the right-wing media about this, do you? No, because they approve of this. But this is what's going on in liberal Seattle. They don't even have the ability to look and say, let's do something about these terrorists. MSNBC and CNN have been making much hay out of the fact that at the state level, you have multiple red state legislatures where the Republican legislatures are trying to enact laws to make it more difficult for black people to vote. And the white left-wing media has been making much hay about that because that's in their interest. That's an okay thing to report on because it's a matter of, oh, you niggers, you need to start voting Democrat blindly again and get engaged for nothing because these Republicans, they're trying to stop you from. That's an argument they don't mind having. But when it comes time to punish white supremacists, actually give the bastards jail time, all of a sudden, MSNBC and CNN, this is a tree that fell in the forest. Oh, to hell with that. This is an entire forest that fell that they're pretending that they didn't hear. All these white supremacists who they're letting go. You had one punk in particular who happens to be the son of a New York City judge. He was one of the terrorists who got caught, but that's okay. They freed him on a $100K bond because apparently that's all that insurrection and treason is worth in the eyes of these federal magistrates. All you got to do is come up with $10K from your well-to-do white families and you'll be okay. Now, the judge's son is the one who's wearing the beard and the glasses with the police vest on, looking like a young Steven Spielberg. His name is Aaron Mostovsky, and yes, he is Jewish from what I've been able to find. Apparently he is, but look at who he's making common cause with. Look at who he's palling around with, the guy just to his right. Now, that happens to be a white supremacist by the name of Kevin Seifried. I told you about him. He's from Joe Biden's home state of Delaware. You guys know him. He was the guy who brought the Confederate flag in there. He says that he normally flies that flag at his home, but he wanted to make it clear that the Confederate flag ought to be flying and reigning inside the United States Capitol. I just consider it to be perversely ironic. You happen to have a man here who is Jewish standing right beside a card-carrying, Confederate flag-waving white supremacist. Haven't heard much from the ADL about this one. Haven't heard much from the Southern Poverty Law Center about this one. Haven't been hearing a whole lot from whatever Jewish voices in media there are, or in the society or politics about this one in particular to explain this to us. How is it that you would have someone who's Jewish, who seems completely and thoroughly comfortable getting together with a bunch of white supremacists, guys running around with Confederate flags? Since when do Jews look at the Confederate flag and say, oh, well, surely these guys don't bear me any animosity? Since when did that happen? But that's exactly what you're seeing here. Gets curiouser and curiouser. But the thing is, that guy with the Confederate flag, Mr. Kevin Seifried, he was allowed to turn himself in, he and his son, who took part in the insurrection. And then they were immediately released that day. As Delaware Online put it, it's likely they will continue to remain free as their case proceeds in federal court in Washington. So what you have is you got a number of individuals from a number of diverse backgrounds, but what's the one thing that they all have in common? Under white supremacy, they're all classified as white, and as a result, they're being given a pass. The prosecutors aren't very worked up about them being free, and neither are the politicians. You don't see anyone at the federal or state level going, wait a minute here. You mean these terrorists, these traitors, these insurrectionists, they're just being allowed to walk free? We need to have stronger laws on the books. See, whenever there's a black person who they feel slipped through the net, next thing you know, here comes some laws. We're going to put some laws on the books and make it clear we need to go ahead and have a couple of Negroes jammed up by these laws just to show we mean business. See, that's what happens when it's a black person who they feel somehow escaped the iron grip of white supremacist injustice. But here you have a whole bunch of white supremacists who recorded themselves attempting to violently overthrow the government, and nobody's saying anything about needing new laws. Joe Biden, he was all hot and bothered for laws back when he was in the Senate. Oh, we need laws for this, laws for that, the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. We need laws to keep black kids out of white schools. We need the 1994 crime bill. Why, we need to go ahead and put a bounty on black people's heads. We're going to write $13 billion into the federal budget and offer it to the states if they'll change their laws and make it where we're going to be going after black people at the federal level, the state level. Okay, what about these white supremacists here? Where's the war on terror, Joe? Cop Moll is supposed to be the nation's top cop. Oh, she's so law and order. oh, things are going to be different. Oh, Donald Trump, I would give Trump a piece of my mind. Well, would you punish Trump? Oh, I'd certainly see him punished. Well, would you punish his supporters? Oh, well, I have to get back to you. That's the game that they're playing. They know exactly the game that they're playing here. They're not going to lose sight of the big picture, and the big picture is you have got to maintain white supremacy. We cannot run around just punishing white supremacists en masse. That would make it where they would be very, very reluctant to ever try to practice white supremacy, and it would destroy the requisite unity that those classified as white under white supremacy require in order to maintain their system. You can't have a situation where you start going after them and punishing them, because then it's a matter of, well, hell, what good is it to be white then? They would fracture. They would not even look at the government and go, well, we think we made our point. It'd be a matter of, well, hell, if the law is going to be punishing us, and if we're no better than anyone else, if we're not treated differently, if we're not allowed to just do whatever the hell we want, then that means being white has no value. And if being white does not automatically confer upon you superior status, starting with in the eyes of the government, then what that means is, why shouldn't they next time show up with as many assault rifles as possible and just shoot the place up? Why shouldn't they do that? White supremacy dances on a razor's edge. There's a whole lot going on right now. How do you make sure the white supremacy is going to be able to be around in some form or another for the next 100 years? That's what's truly at stake here. They cannot have that absolutely necessary unity that white supremacy requires among its beneficiaries and benefactors to be fractured. They can't allow that. So when you and I start talking about punishing white supremacy, when you and I start talking about it's time for y'all in the government to go ahead and launch another war, time for a war on white supremacy, they don't merely get angry and offended, they get scared. Because they understand as well as everybody else, that's what's supposed to be called for here, but none of them are talking about it. Joe Biden isn't talking about it. Kamala Harris ain't talking about it. Nancy Pelosi ain't talking about it. You don't even have your left-leaning mouthpieces and pundits talking about it. You damn sure ain't got the white media talking about it. Oh, Rachel Maddow ain't talking about no war on white supremacy. Nobody's talking about a war on white supremacy. Instead, they've been saying the opposite. The nation needs to heal. And we need unity and to bring people together. Yeah, don't you want to have unity with old boy with the Confederate flag? I mean, don't you know that you can find common ground with him somewhere between you being enslaved and you being free? If somewhere in between you being property and you being your own master, there's got to be a middle ground in there somewhere that you're willing to settle for, right? Just keep in mind, any movement would have to take place on his terms, not yours. Because he's not going to accept a status quo where he is not a super citizen by benefit of being white. He's not going to accept that. The movement would have to be from your end, not his. This is what the white media wants, that they're trying to indoctrinate people through repetition that it's reasonable to let's just put this behind us. Yeah, same as all those killings of black people. Well, these are unfortunate circumstances, unfortunate happenstance, and we should just move on. But it's the courts that are doing their part now, so that the politicians get to say, oh, well, it wasn't our idea. It was these freaking judges. Oh, who can possibly comprehend these judges' rulings? You notice that that is the consistent through line. Whether it be the police or these insurrectionists, that happens to be the consistent trait of American injustice. That if you have harmed a black person, or you are deemed as having committed some horrendous act in the name of white supremacy, well, the judges are going to go easy on you, and nobody's going to be saying, hey, these judges have completely and thoroughly ignored the law. They need to be stripped of their law degrees. Nobody's going to go on a crusade to have these judges disbarred and knocked off the bench. Nobody's going to make a jihad out of getting these guys replaced or having them punished or pointing out, wait a minute, these guys are blatant collaborators with white supremacy. These guys are condoning treason. Nobody's going to be doing that. And the reason why is both the white left and the white right depend on the judiciary as being just another way of getting what they want without the politicians having to pay a political price. You want to be able to try to basically bar black people from institutions of higher learning? Well, what you do is you file a lawsuit. That way the politicians don't have to take the political hit. And the judges who hand down these unconstitutional rulings, they're going to be appointees, which means they don't have to worry about the voters voting them out because they were appointed anyway. And if you're on the white left and you happen to have some laws you want to get passed because you're trying to leapfrog black people, you want to make it where you artificially confer higher status on other people. Well, you have some sort of lawsuit passed for people based on their sexual lifestyle or based on being illegal immigrants. And you make sure that you have some judge pass that too. That way there can be no political punishment at the polls for them. Both the white left and the white right play the exact same game by the exact same methods for the exact same goal. And just in case you think that perhaps these white supremacist insurrectionists, this is the end of it, nah. America's favorite degenerate juvenile delinquent, Kyle Rittenhouse, well, turns out that he told prosecutors a little fib about where his whereabouts would be, and he ran off to parts unknown. Eventually, the authorities were able to find out where he was at, and the prosecutors told the judge, "Hey, Your Honor, you know what's supposed to happen. This guy ran off, didn't say where the hell he was. We need to have him not only rearrested, we need to increase bond." Now, what's supposed to happen is that's a prosecutor already using just trick bag language. Somebody like this who's guilty of murdering two people who crossed state lines to commit his crime. He was running around with an assault rifle underage. That's a felony right then and there. Him and his mother ought to be hemmed up. And yet you got the prosecutor talking about a bond hike. No, it's supposed to be a revoking of his bond. That's what it means. This guy gets held until a verdict is rendered. But, you already got the prosecutor trying to say, well, Your Honor, maybe if we just increase his bail, that's enough for him. Sure, he killed two people, but those people, they were calling themselves standing up for Black Lives Matter. So that being the case, we don't want to be too harsh on them now. And the judge, winking a nod, said, I get the message. I'll tell you what, though, I ain't gonna do nothing to him. Rearrest him? Nah, I don't think so. He says that he's worried about his safety, and best thing we can do is keep this white supremacist little thug on the streets. That's what the judge did. Judge decided, yeah, under any other circumstances, Rittenhouse wouldn't have had bail to begin with. But even if he did, if he were black and he did something like this, the prosecutor wouldn't have had to make a motion to rearrest. The judge would have been the one ordering it from the bench. Rearrest that nigger, and this time, no bond. We could tell you were bad news. As soon as you got arrested, we could tell. You're going to be behind bars pending verdict. You're just going to stay there until a jury decides what to do about you. And the judge himself wanted to make it clear that this was not just being done as a result of an incompetent jurist or being done because this guy has some eccentric, asinine view of the law. He made it very clear that he was directly connecting this decision to the protest that took place in Kenosha. He directly linked it to that. He said, well, some of the windows on the courthouse got broken. Why, we've got some plywood up, and as far as I'm concerned, because of the unrest, this guy should remain out. He should remain free because, well, there was some unrest. When he was doing that to make it very clear. This is him showing I'm siding with the white supremacists. Oh, you niggers thought that you were actually going to force the system to punish white supremacists? Oh, I want you to know that we're doing this as a direct response. This is a direct reprisal to you calling yourselves standing up for your rights, thinking you're going to stand up to white supremacy. This is a direct reprisal for that. That's what the judge was getting across. Having this guy refusing to rearrest him, he linked it directly to the protest that took place in Kenosha last year. He linked it directly to that because that was the point. He wanted to make it clear. The judge himself is a white supremacist fighting the race war from the bench. And as we see with these other Capitol Hill coup plotters, the scumbag jurist in Kenosha, he's not alone. But this goes way beyond the coup plotters and the murderous thug, Kyle Rittenhouse. I had posted on my Twitter feed yesterday that the new Los Angeles DA, George Gascon, he had announced that he was going to not be going blindly to use 3 strikes and prosecuting people under 3 strikes anymore, that he was going to be going lighter on people and taking it on a case-by-case basis, as opposed to let's just jam everybody up. You see, Kamala Harris didn't do that. The former DA of Los Angeles, Jackie Lacey, she was opposed to that, and this was a black woman, by the way. But George Gascon said that he was not going to be just blindly using 3 strikes. In fact, what he said was that he wasn't going to be looking at that anymore, and he was just basically going to be taking it on a case-by-case basis. You know what happened? His own assistant district attorneys, the union that represents the hundreds of Los Angeles County prosecutors, I want you to think about that. Los Angeles County has hundreds of prosecutors. I mean, the freaking prison buses are just coming in and out of the courtrooms constantly there. Hundreds of prosecutors in Los Angeles County. That lets you know just how important it is that they be able to have black people jammed up under color of law. They got hundreds of individuals to carry out that purpose. And even though the DA may not be on board with it, the union for those Los Angeles prosecutors, they actually sued George Gascon. He was sued by his own assistant district attorneys. And they were claiming that he had exceeded his legal authorities. Now, they're supposed to be his employees. They're supposed to be his subordinates. And here they are saying the DA is out of order here. Naturally, of course, they had a judge who immediately said, you know what, you're right. This Gascon guy, he's bad for business. He's bad for white supremacy. Now, keep in mind, Kamala Harris, when she was Attorney General of California, Proposition 8 was passed by the voters, just like California's 3 strikes law. That's what the assistant district attorneys union was lying about. That's one of their little cop-outs saying, well, you know, the people held a there was a referendum, you know, there was a referendum and the people, and because of that, what that means is there's nothing that this Gascon guy should be able to do. After all, the people voted for, and that's all that matters. He can't refuse to enforce the law. He can't refuse to do that. That's what they were saying. That because it was the result of a voter referendum, because it was state law, he didn't have the authority to refuse to enforce it. Now, when Kamala Harris, as California Attorney General, decided that she didn't like another voter referendum, Proposition 8, that outlawed gay marriage in California, you did not have any prosecutors union anywhere in the whole freaking state. Forget about Los Angeles County. There wasn't any prosecutors anywhere in the state who were willing to sue her about that or take issue with it. Not a single one of those law degree carrying bastards had a word to say about it. No judges either. She said, I'm not enforcing that. I have judicial discretion and I am discreetly going to allow for whatever it is that these LGBTs, mostly white ones, because they didn't give a damn about the black LGBT community, but they can just do whatever the world they want. And that being the case, if it's something that they don't agree with, then I'm not about to enforce it. And none of those prosecutors anywhere in the state had a problem with it. None of them. So now you have George Gascon doing the exact same thing. And he's not even doing it at a statewide level. He's doing it at the county level. Gee, wasn't it Kamala Harris who was saying that, well, I can't get involved in these killings and such at the county level because those are local issues. Well, shouldn't what Gascon's doing be seen as a local issue? But the problem happens to be if you have California's most populous county, where the top cop of the county says, you know what, I'm going to start using some common sense and common decency when it comes to these laws, because Los Angeles is just an absolute prison mill. It's a machine. And yes, across the country, we all know about it. California's got their machines set up where it, especially in Los Angeles, where it doesn't even make sense. It's just a matter of this is the machine by which we're going to be repressing and suppressing black people. We're going to make it where you can get jammed up for anything. The cops can come and harass you at any time that they want. The cops can just run up on you and throw you in handcuffs, not because you've committed a crime. It's a matter of, sir, we want to talk to you. Turn around. We're going to put you in handcuffs. What are the handcuffs for? They're for our safety. Now, what's the name of the street that you're on? Do you know which way to the Dunkin' Donuts? They do that in Los Angeles all the time. It's meant to be a form of harassment. That if you're black, the cops come and throw you in handcuffs simply as a form of harassment. Just to remind you that, well, we can do anything that we want, and that's supposed to be law? No, it's not. Everybody knows it's pointed strictly at black people. Again, where are the prosecutors filing their lawsuits? See, these prosecutors have no problem filing lawsuits as long as it's something that upholds white supremacy. And these are supposed to be the prosecutors who claim that they carry out their duties without fear or favor. Yeah, they uphold white supremacy without fear, and they do it without any favor of justice whatsoever. So this is what's going on across the board. You see that the courtrooms happen to be the fallback position for all of these white supremacists. They're like, okay, you guys have basically made it where the cops' backs have been broken. You've also made it where the politicians have been forced to bend the knee, however grudgingly. Okay, our fallback position is the courts. And I told you that they were going to be doing this. I told you that the police and others, they would be relying on bench trials. They would be relying on the judges to dump this stuff. The prosecutors would be terrified because they would actually know that people would look at them and say, we can get you voted out of office. We can have you stripped of your law degree. We can make a cause celeb out of you. Judges, they're hoping, on the other hand, that the judicial position is a boring one. And who's going to care about that anyway? Well, you better care about it. And you better understand that it's not just the police and these politicians who are collaborators with all of these white supremacist criminals. It's these judges as well. The judiciary is an absolute teeming, reeking, putrid cesspool of white supremacists, and every last one of the bastards carrying a law degree. Now your mushmouth former prosecutors turned wannabe reparations advocates, they ain't gonna be talking to you like this. Hell, they were part of the problem, and still are. But we, the black grassroots, we cannot afford to be naive about this. We can't afford to be slacking off either. These white supremacist attacks under color of law cannot go unanswered and must not go unpunished. When you have judges who are blatantly violating the law, when you got prosecutors getting together and filing absolutely nonsense lawsuits that you got some judge who decides, we're going to pretend as if there's something legitimate about this. That is when you understand that this is all about fiat. This is not about law at all. This is just about, well, under white supremacy, what we say goes. See, they're making a very calculated risk right now. This is a calculated risk on their part. The calculation is that last year was just a one-off. Oh, well, it was because of the quarantining, and also because there was a lot of pent-up frustration. They're calculating that was just a one-off. Some folks needed to blow off some steam, or just people had been cooped up inside the house, etc., etc. Or, hey, it was an election year. That's the calculation that they're making. And you got these judges thinking to themselves, well, nobody knows who I am, and nobody would care anyway, and it's a judicial ruling, and, well, people are only concerned about the politicians anyway. That's what these judges are banking on. Whether it be the ones who release the coup plotters, or the bastard in Kenosha who decides that he's going to take a hands-off approach with Kyle Rittenhouse, or the Los Angeles Prosecutors Union, who has made it very clear that if the DA refuses to prosecute the race war, then they're going to be going to war with him themselves. The courtrooms are not courtrooms at all. They are nothing more than judicial caverns. But this is part of the process of breaking white supremacy's back, taking away each of their little bulwarks, making it very clear that as we push the bastards back, as we force them to retreat, as we have driven them from one fallback position to the next, we're going to be overrunning their position over and over again. We're not going to be allowing them to have any respite. No, there's not going to be any place for you to rest and decide to catch your breath. We got the bastards on the run, and we're going to keep them on the run. The tenet of white immunity from law is the second most important crucial element of white supremacy. The financial tangible benefits happens to be the most important, but as far as from a social standpoint goes, immunity from law, if you're classified as white, that is the single most important tenet of white supremacy that must be preserved. Because everybody who's classified as white knows about it. And as we've seen with the coup plotters and Rittenhouse and the LA DA's union, they all know about it and they rely on it. They're expecting it. It must be preserved. Because if you eliminate that white immunity from law, well, what it means is a whole lot of folks are going to be finding themselves in prison very quickly. To them, power means absolutely nothing. It's not power at all unless you can abuse it. But for them, the measure of their power is how much they can abuse us. And it falls to all of us to make sure that that decrepit practice comes to an end. It's up to us to call halt on that. The black grassroots are on a mission to put white supremacy on trial. And we will be both judge and jury.